Go inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris.
Well, you talk about a perfect storm for the Crimson Tide. Everything that needed to happen to move Alabama into the national championship game happened last week. First on Friday night, number 2 and then unbeaten Oklahoma State lost at 4-touchdown underdog Iowa State. That pretty much gave Bama the edge for the BCS game. Then to help pad the ballot box, both one-loss Oklahoma and one-loss Oregon picked up their second losses of the season on Saturday. So here's what the new BCS standings look like, and it's an all-SEC party at the top. LSU, Alabama, and Arkansas, 1, 2, 3 respectively. And don't count Bama entirely out of the SEC championship hunt either. Should Arkansas defeat LSU, and the standings then move to Alabama 1, Arkansas 2, and LSU 3. If that happened, the Tide would head to Atlanta. I think a lot of Bama fans would just as soon play in the BCS game without having to play in the SEC game. That discussion is coming up in a short while. And oh yeah, of course, this is Iron Bowl week. Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Tider Insider TV, presented by Buffalo Rock. As always, enjoying ice-cold Pepsi Cola tonight. Got to get back and have a little sip here because my mouth is just a little bit dry, and I want to anticipate all the talking we're going to be doing tonight. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm Gary Harris. We'll get to the big showdown with Auburn shortly. First, though, the ever-changing BCS picture. Nick Saban didn't want to talk about it Saturday after the game or Monday during his weekly press conference.
When you start thinking about that, you're looking at the scoreboard. That's what you're looking at. So we really don't want that. And I know that's hard for you all to understand, all right, because that's all you think about, and that's all I get asked about. But all I care about is how our team plays, because I have no control over any of that stuff. We got one vote. We really don't have any interest in anybody playing in the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or 12 or whatever it is, or the Big 12 or any of those games really don't matter. None of those games matter. None of anything matters except how we play in this game.
And Rodney, back when Alabama and LSU played, most of the pundits, practically all of them in fact, said these were the two best teams, so I guess it's fitting that they seem in line for a rematch. But an amazing weekend. I mean, first of all, in Iowa State, was a 4-touchdown underdog at home. They shock Oklahoma State and get the victory there. Then Oklahoma was ready to poised to move up. They get beaten at Baylor for the first time ever. They were 20-0 against Baylor. And then an Oregon team that had all kinds of momentum got beat at home by USC. So Alabama's not just in the picture, but really in the catbird seat now.
Did you kind of get the feel going into Saturday, Gary, that they were trying to create a way to keep Alabama out of it? In other words, build cases for other teams?
I thought that was happening, but unfortunately those teams they were building cases for weren't good enough to get it done on the field.
Very fortunately.
And thankfully that's still what it comes down to ultimately.
Every one of those teams knocked off, and the opportunity for Oklahoma State to go in possibly and have a big win over Oklahoma, that's certainly not the case anymore. And again, everything seemed to fall into place. But Nick Saban's right. I mean, the bottom line is Alabama has to beat Auburn. And, going down there, we know what it's like playing down there. We saw it 2 years ago when Alabama was clearly the better team, won the national championship that year and struggled, had to win in the last minute and a half of the game. And so, again, take care of business first, and then let's see where everything falls.
Interestingly enough, reading your board, TiderInsider.com, the famous closed forum, it seems like a lot of Bama fans, some at least, would rather win the SEC championship than the BCS title, and there's still a chance Alabama could play in that game. However, unless it happens, that's another subject that's off limits for the Tide.
In fact, I think I'm going to tell the team today, if you want to watch the LSU-Arkansas game, turn it off and go watch some Auburn film, because that game means nothing to us either. So if you all are going to ask me about it, I hope you don't.
And the SEC situation is this. If Arkansas were to defeat LSU, there's a chance that Alabama and Arkansas could be 1-2 in the BCS standings, and that would propel Alabama into the SEC championship game. Just your thoughts.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ifs there, and certainly, I think when you look at that game and you look at the Arkansas-LSU game, a lot of people didn't think Arkansas had a chance, but, Bobby Petrino, I think, Gary, is a great matchup. His offense, his system going against LSU. Now, hey, I know how good Les Miles' defenses are, John Chavis, but at the same time, Bobby Petrino's found a way to score some points on LSU.
You know something else I have discovered?
What's that?
Some insight. When Nick Saban starts tapping that podium, he doesn't want you asking a question about whatever he's talking about at that time. I have figured that out. Some in-depth research there. All right, Rodney, regardless of what happens there, Alabama, as you've already mentioned, has a football game to play of its own. And it's bigger now than anything else that's out there for the Crimson Tide. That's the Iron Bowl. Alabama is a big favorite in this one. Hard to believe that the Crimson Tide, a 3-touchdown pick. Are you surprised that Alabama is this heavily favored? Because, first of all, it's a rivalry game. Secondly, Auburn's lost 4 times this year, Rodney, but none of them have been at home. In fact, they haven't lost a home game in 2 years. You have to go back to 2009 when Alabama beat them 26-21 to find the last time Auburn lost at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Just your thoughts?
Well, first of all, when you look at the line, which I think means absolutely nothing, but when you look at it, Gary, you take away the two wins that they had, Auburn had over the Mississippi schools, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. You take those away, Auburn's losing in the SEC by an average of 34-13. That's 21 points a game right there. So, you know, based on that, no, I'm not really surprised. But knowing the game and knowing the facts and the history of the game, yeah, I'm surprised because that is a huge, huge line. And having to play down there, you know, how many times has Alabama won down there? Twice?
I think 3 times.
3 times? Okay.
You know, 99, 2001, and 2009.
Right.
You know, I think that you mentioned a good point there that Auburn's losses in the SEC recently just haven't been losses. They've been clobbered. And Gene Chizik's first 2 football teams, they seem to get better as the season went along. That was one of their biggest attributes, you know, especially last year when they won the national championship. This year, though, you can make a case that they've regressed in terms of how they're playing.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the big loss to Georgia, Gary, that was over in Athens, 45-7. And, you know, I think that they've never really been settled at the quarterback spot. They've had defensive issues from the very first game. You remember Utah State put up 38 on them. There was, you know, they were giving up 38 points a game through the first 3 games. And they've just struggled defensively in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, thinking about Auburn giving up 406 yards a game on defense. And not only that, giving up, you know, the points that we mentioned, the 34-13 differential, and they're giving up to 193 yards a game rushing. But I want to tell you something. You know, for people who see those numbers and think, you know, 193 yards rushing, Trent's going to have a big day. Let me tell you, Auburn will play their best game defensively.
Yeah, I remember 2 years ago they didn't let Ingram get anything.
They're going to play their best game. They're going to stack the line of scrimmage. They're going to try to stop Trent Richardson. They're going to try to make A.J. McCarron step up and beat them.
In fact, that was Ingram's poorest game as a running back in Alabama. Was against Auburn 2 years ago. They completely shut him down. But when you look at the numbers, you're right. For them, they're not good. And if you just looked at the numbers, you can see why Alabama is a 3-touchdown favorite. But, you know, again, we'll see the best Auburn team that we've seen all season, I think, on Saturday. Well, still to come on TITV, we'll talk more about the motto and the Tide's battle cry after last year's meltdown. But up next, we'll look back to last weekend's harder-than-expected victory. Should Bama fans be concerned because of what happened against Georgia Southern? Plus, we'll get to your phone calls and emails. You can give us a ring at 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Or, you know, football, we know, can take some funny bounces, can be a strange game. Alabama's played traditional powers like Arkansas, Penn State, LSU, and Tennessee this season, and not given up more than 14 points in a game. They play the former Division I AA power, current FCS schools, what they call them, Georgia Southern. And Rodney, they give up 21 points, over 300 yards rushing a game. This was a team giving up 50 yards rushing a game. I mean, hard to figure sometime. Alabama did sit some guys out. You know, some others they didn't play that much. But should Bama fans be concerned with what they saw against Georgia Southern?
Well, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that game, Gary, when you look at it. First of all, you know, this was Georgia Southern's game of the year. You know that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they came in highly motivated to win. They've got a winning attitude.
Mm-hmm.
They're a good football, great football team.
Championships in 30 years.
They've got a great football team on their level. There's no question about it. They're a good team. They're competitive. They had an opportunity to come in against an Alabama team that, quite honestly, has been banged up. Not a real healthy Alabama team since the LSU game, and that's not making excuses, but a lot of guys, when you're looking out there, you see a freshman, Jeffrey Pagan on the defensive line, redshirt freshman, Brandon Ivory working at nose guard. So, you know, you just had a lot of guys out, no doubt about it, and I don't think, honestly, to be, you know, and this is just a thought, and I shared this with you during the game. I had to wonder many times, you know, how much time did Alabama devote to Georgia Southern? How much time did they devote possibly to Auburn during the week? Now, you know, again, I don't know that they devoted any time to Auburn, but I suspect that they did.
Rodney, there's a popular school of thought going around that the LSU game took a lot out of Alabama. That, you know, they were basically a healthy football team going into that game, but they got beat up mentally and physically and still haven't rebounded. You sense that that's true at all?
Possibly. I think certainly physically, Gary, and probably emotionally a little bit because, you know, when you play in a game like that, I mean, the game went 60 minutes. It was tied. You had to go into overtime. You lose in the fashion that Alabama lost 9-6 in a game that had so much riding on the outcome. And certainly it took a lot out of the players. And I don't think there's any question about that. Emotionally, Alabama, I think, has been drained, but they've done a nice job having to recover to go on the road to Mississippi State. It's a solid football team. And again, you knew that Mississippi State was going to play its best game of the year against Alabama. And so Alabama found a way to win that game. And again, last week against Georgia Southern, it was just a difficult game. It's been difficult for Alabama to get up. But, you know, I think if Alabama can get through this game against Auburn, you know, certainly when you start looking forward, that 6 weeks of rest would certainly be great for them.
Yeah, and hopefully have Barrett Jones back, Hanks back, Chapman back, Gentry back, who Gentry sat out with suspension, DeAndre White and others. The team we saw this past Saturday isn't the team we're going to see at Auburn this coming Saturday, and that's good news for Bama fans. Well, coming up next, never again. That's the motto the Tide players came up with following last year's second-half meltdown against Auburn. Is the Tide out for revenge this time around? Plus, your phone calls and emails. There's the information on the screen that you need to get in touch with us. So jot it down. Talk with us here on the program coming up. We'll also talk some men's basketball when TITV continues right here on WBO.